Hello humans! Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here. This is the oceanus Kraken. It's very simple guy. It's got a removable razor blade, little 4-bar system for opening and closing. I think is super cool. I'm a huge fan of combat robotics. I have been for a very long time. And one of the first bots when I was first getting into combat robotics, this was right after the reboot of BattleBots, and I was burning back through rewatching the old Comedy Central days, and I loved Biohazard. Watching Biohazard fight always felt super cool. It's such a technical machine. It ended up getting retired by Gigabyte a little bit after the show, but during the show's era, it was just so cool, and I loved it so much, and I love that 4-bar mechanism. Lucky in the reboot uses a very similar mechanism, and it is one of the coolest mechanisms in my opinion. I love watching it. I love seeing bots like that fight. I think they're so cool. The way they throw things is so different. And I found a knife that uses the system, so I just jumped on it. Not only did it use the system, it is in one of my absolute favorite materials, brass. I love brass things. I love the brass of the Buck 110. I love brass coins. I love brass. I mean, my belt buckle is brass. Brass belt buckle, 10 out of 10, you know. I love brass items. I think that they are super cool. So seeing something that was one of my favorite mechanical mechanisms coupled with my favorite material, I just jumped on it. It was my first time ordering a knife online. It was my first time ordering a knife overseas. It was my first time dealing with customs on my own. It was a lot of firsts. I've had this knife for 3 or 4 years now. Quite a while. I ended up buying it with my paycheck for my summer job. You know, super cool. I ended up picking it up a little bit after their GoFundMe period had ended, when it was first listed on their website. I have no idea if it's still on their website. Whether it is or isn't, Ocean Brass will be linked in the description because everything they make is so cool. I love their stuff. I'm especially a fan of their brass lighters. I think that their brass lighters and their brass flint strikers are just super neat. Honestly, all their stuff's neat. I love brass, but that's a whole different discussion. This is just a very simple, very heavy razor blade, right? The way that I've found works best in terms of holding it is to sort of lay it in the hand and then use my index finger and do draw cuts. It's very nice for the draw cuts. If I were to use it for an extended period of time, I think I'd probably end up pulling off this lanyard barrel. It's super cool. I absolutely love it. I think it is gorgeous. Little brass hoop thing. But using this for extended periods of time, it does start to dig into sort of the bottom of the palm of your hand. So if you were to use this for an extended period of time, I'd recommend removing it. I don't see much of a point in using this for an extended period of time. It's too heavy to EDC, and I personally don't like EDCing razor blades. I've done it in the past. I have a few knives specifically for it. I've done it with work when I need, disposable razor blades because I'm cutting up carpet, stuff like that. I'll carry something along the lines of this Gerber EAR or ERB, whatever it is. I think it's ERB. Super cool, but I don't use razor blades often enough for anything other than package opening. So this guy sits on my desk. It has a little display. It sits up nicely. It's been patining over the last couple of years, as you can see, which I just think is super cool. I love the way brass patinas, where each patina is unique. Something I'm a huge fan of doing when I get antique knives is cleaning the patina off them and then allowing them to repatina to me rather than to their previous owners. Depending on the knife, right? Like I've got some knives that are so unique, or some, not even just knives, that are so unique to their previous owners, so much history in them that cleaning them feels disingenuous to the piece. So I don't clean all of them, but something like my Buck 110, which is in very nice condition. It was just green when I first caught it. So I did end up cleaning it up, and as you can see, it started to repatina to me a little bit, which I like, it's super cool. Allowing something like this to repatina to you just, I think adds a lot of character, like personal character. Just my own personal rant on the way that brass patinas. I love this stuff. Like I said, this operates on a 4-bar system. Very similar to the CRKT Provoke, which also uses a 4-bar system. As you can see, pop pops up like that. See them both at sort of the half pop position. Some of the things that do in fact make this quite a bit different from the CRKT Provoke is one, it actually uses magnets. So you can see the two magnets here for the closed position. There's also two magnets up here for the open position. And correspondingly, there is two magnets on the sort of blade holding edge. The other big difference with the CRKT from the CRKT Provoke is how you open it. I'm pretty sure the recommended way has got to be with two hands, but we're knife people, we don't do that. What I found works best is digging my thumbnail underneath the back here and just sort of giving it a flick. It fires out really nicely then, and the best way I found for closing is very, very similarly to like a crossbar lock. Pulling back on these two pieces right here works a lot better when I'm actually holding it properly. And then just letting it drop straight back into my hand. So, flick out, climb forward, open up my package, zoom, 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 and then pull these back and just let it drop. I think it makes some absolutely gorgeous sounds too. And then very, very mechanical, very, very tactile, both in feel and in sound, which I think is super, super cool. I mean, it's a big bunch of moving parts, which I just think is awesome in general. All of the different components are Loctited together. They are all T10s. But they're not captive, so they're actually free spinning. So you do need two to open up, which does get a little bit annoying. The blade, sorry, my bits are held in way too well into their packaging, and it gets annoying sometimes. The two bits that hold the blade in place are simple flathead number 3s. Best way, blah, blah, blah. So you simply unscrew both of the bolts, 1 and 2. This one here is a little bit stiff. So you undo the two blades, nice and simple. And then you can pull the blade out. This piece right here remains captive. If you take this particular one of the bars off, you can take it out if you need to clean under there or whatever. But generally, I wouldn't recommend doing that because you can end up losing it. And then you just fit your new blade between the two. You stick it all the way in the back until you can see through the two holes. And then it's as simple as screwing your two bolts back in. The back side of the brass is threaded, which means as long as everything is properly aligned and you are good and straight, it just screws right back in. It is a little bit finicky just because both ends are open, but you can tighten them both right down. And then the back of the screws actually end up fitting just about flush with the back of this particular piece, which I think is pretty cool. Just gonna put my tools back. And that's them back. Super fun fidget toy. It is very, very different type of fidgeting compared to most knives. Something like the Wii Banter is super fun to fidget with because of its incredibly smooth, drop-shutty action. And it's very, very satisfying click to throw open. Something like this is super fun to play with for very, very different reasons. It's just different to play with. It's a different type of object entirely. It's very mechanical, it's a little bit heavy, it's just clunky. You need to manipulate your hand around it a lot in order to play with it, which some people like, some people don't. I'm definitely in the camp that likes it. it's idle enough that I can fidget without thinking, but it's mechanical and intentional enough that my hand doesn't get bored doing it, which I have experienced on some other mechanisms, especially stuff like crossbar locks, where you just pull back the crossbar and then flick open, close, open, close, open, close. It gets a little boring, by which I mean your mind disassociates from it a little bit, which, generally speaking, when I'm fidgeting, I am trying to keep the more wandering part of my mind busy with something somewhat entertaining that I don't need to spend too much energy on. So something like this that is a very, it's fidgety, but it requires a lot of different manipulation to fidget with, I personally really like. Replaceable blades means that I don't need to worry about sharpening it. It can just sit on my office desk, and I can pull it open up a package, put it back. Whenever it dulls to the point where it doesn't open packages nicely anymore, I just disregard this blade, slip a new one in, tighten it down, and I am done, perfect, and ready for the next time I need to do it, which I really like. I like being able to do that with knives that don't get carried, don't move around. I keep my stones in my workspace, and I keep this guy in my office, so they're never really associated with each other. They're never stuck. They're never in the same place. So having a knife that never leaves my office, one, means I always have a sharp blade in my office, which I normally have 2 in my pockets anyway, so it's not the biggest of deals. But it is nice to have a dedicated office edge. Just personal opinion, right? Obviously, the comparison this guy is going to make is to the CRKT Provoke. As I've mentioned, they're very different. This guy right here gets thrown by digging your thumbnail underneath it and flicking up, whereas the CRKT Provoke, it's got this little texturing right here, and it throws down. The CRKT Provoke is a karambit. They operate on the same system, and they're nearly the same sized handle, but honestly, other than that, the similarities, apologies, English, are not very big between the two of them. And not to mention the fact that the Provoke is a locking knife, whereas this right here is just held in place with magnets. Which again, I'm not worried about it like closing on me, right? Like as soon as you're holding this thing, it's not going to close because it has to go against your hand in order to do so. But you know, is worth noting. Some other size comparisons, just real quick. Up against the Wee Knives Banter and the Civivi Chevalier. Apparently we're doing pocket clip sides today. As you can see, it's like there's a lot of handle. You're not getting very much blade. That's sort of what you get with razor blades. The only other comparison that I think is even worth making, I'll make my full list of comparisons just because here it is next to the Buck 110. As you can see, it's quite a bit smaller than the Buck 110. Tons less edge, as you'd expect. The comparison that I do think is worth making is actually with the Zippo. Close this up real fast. It is, you know, not quite double the length of the Zippo, but it's not too far off either. And it is fairly similar thickness to the Zippo. As you can see there, they might actually be exactly the same thickness. So, you know, if this is a comfortable object to hold in your hands, then this will be a comfortable object to hold in your hands. I wouldn't necessarily recommend choking up. There's nothing to protect you from sliding onto the blade, which is, it's not easy to do necessarily, but it's not difficult to do by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, the machining feels really nice. The only spot that I will say I wish there was a little bit tighter is with sort of the arms. They feel like there's some movement in them, which doesn't necessarily feel the best. But I think it's tricky. I think that in order to get that right there perfect, like tight to where they're not feeling like they're a little bit rattly, it would be so tight that it's not particularly enjoyable to open and close. And I'd rather have the enjoyable open and close than have perfectly non-rattly, especially with something like this, which is, you know, magnetically attached, which is never going to be rock solid anyways. On balance, I much prefer having this problem than any of the problems that would arise from trying to fix this problem, is where I'm at personally. As I've said, Oceanus Brass does lots of really cool things in brass, including sell it to people, which that's cool. They make dice, they make lighters, they make other replaceable blade knives, mostly X-Acto style replaceable blade knives. They're super cool. I really like their stuff. I think that they work on some beautiful, beautiful things, and I do think they are absolutely worth checking out. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description for them. I have no association with them. They don't know I exist. I'm speaking to like 4 people, but you know, they're cool. I want to shout them out, so I'm going to shout them out. Yeah, just a little office critter. Oops. I don't know if it's still for sale. If it is, it's another thing that's a little bit weird to recommend. You know, if you want this, I say get it. But you knew as soon as you saw this thing whether or not you were interested in it or not, right? Like, this is just an opportunity for me to talk about something that I think is really cool. And I do think it's really cool. I think it's a very different way of fidgeting. I think that for what I use it for, which again, you know, opening packages, extremely light duty work, sitting at my office desk and looking really, really pretty, it does all that stuff really well. And that's what I wanted it to do. I'm very, like, I like this thing. I think it's super cool. I think whenever I get a chance to show it off, I love showing it off. I think it's beautiful because I like the look of brass. But again, you know, recommendations as far as purchasing goes, it was 100 Canadian bucks. I don't think I wasted my money, personally. Yeah, I'm happy with what I got. And I can't guarantee you would be because that depends on what you want in an item. That's the fundamentals of it. But in general, I think it's cool. I like the brass. I like the weight of it. I like the look of it. I'm dropping it. Please apologize. It's the end of a very long day for me. I am actually going to head off. Stay safe. Have fun out there. Peace.